Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. It's a big week here in Washington, so we want to get quickly to our very first guest, Republican Senator John Kennedy, who joins us this morning from Kenner, Louisiana. Good morning, Senator, and congrats on the big win.
Thank you, Margaret. It was a great game. I'm proud of our youngsters, but Alabama played a great game too.
Very generous of you there. I want to quickly get to the issue at hand. You heard.
I meant it. Actually, I meant it.
I'm glad. In our show open, you heard a quote from yourself talking about what is appropriate and inappropriate in terms of quid pro quos. If a quid pro quo was shown to be for the president's own political benefit, is that appropriate?
The quid pro quo, in my judgment, is a red herring. Here are the two possible scenarios. Number one, the president asked for an investigation of a political rival. Number two, the president asked for an investigation of possible corruption by someone who happens to be a political rival. The latter would be in the national interest. The former would be in the president's parochial interest and would be over the line. I think this case is going to come down to the president's intent, his motive. Did he have a culpable state of mind? For me, Margaret, there are only two relevant questions that need to be answered. Why did the president ask for an investigation? And number two, and this is inextricably linked to the first question, what did Mr. Hunter Biden do for the money?
Well, I want to ask you now, there have been more than 2,500 pages of sworn testimony that have been released to the public. Have you read any of those depositions?
I've read some, but any lawyer, in my judgment, who knows a law book from a J. Crew catalog knows that a sterile transcript is no substitute for live witnesses.
Okay. And I want to ask you specific. So I just want to ask you specifically because of the point you're making in terms of differentiating intent, motive, and culpable state of mind. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, a decorated Army officer who gave sworn testimony, it was released this week. He currently works at the White House. Listened to President Trump's call with the Ukrainian president, and he testified, quote, there was no doubt that the president was seeking political investigations of political rivals. So, is it appropriate to ask foreign governments to investigate Americans?
Well, it depends on the circumstances. I'm not going to go through the two scenarios that I just gave you, but it depends on the circumstances. And I would say this about the transcript. I can comment on the gentleman's testimony if you let me hear his live testimony. Let me hear the cross-examination. Let me judge his credibility. Let me judge his body language. And also allow the opposing party to call their own witnesses in rebuttal. That's due process. Not only allowing the witnesses you want, as the chairman has done, and then leaking selective portions of it to friendly members of the media who lap it up like a puppy.
Well, all the depositions that I'm quoting from are now publicly released. So it was
now
the government that released
them. But before,
right.
when they were trying, to establish the narrative with the American people, they were selectively leaking. And that's
now
what
we're moving into
Margaret.
public.
What are the American?
Right. Well, now the case has got to be made to the American public. Now the case has to be made to the American public in these public hearings. So is there anything that you could hear from Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, if and when he's called to testify, that would lead you to ever vote for the removal of the president?
Well, again, I've got to hear the testimony.
So that means maybe.
If you want to, if you would try to assess how a trial is going for a defendant, you don't just listen to the lawyer's opening statements and you don't just read the transcript. You sit there and listen to all the testimony, the cross-examination, and the context. And I think that Speaker Pelosi's decision and Adam Schiff's decision to prevent the Republicans from calling their own witnesses in the live testimony is just doubling down on stupid. The American people, I think, are going to look at this and go, I get it. They're going to give the president a fair and impartial firing squad.
So
and that's not due process.
But you're not suggesting here that the witnesses, like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, lack credibility?
I don't know. I wasn't allowed to hear them. What I am telling you is that if it can be demonstrated that the president asked for, and had the requisite state of mind, that the president asked for an investigation of a political rival, that's over the line.
Okay.
But if he asked for an investigation of possible corruption by someone who happens to be a political rival, that's not over the line.
So over the line, does that mean impeachable?
Yeah, probably.
So there is something you could hear that could potentially persuade you to vote for removal?
Well, I can't answer that, Margaret, because that encompasses all possible scenarios. That's like asking me, if I didn't go fishing Saturday, how many fish would I have caught? All I'm saying is that it ought to be fair. It ought to be public. I read somewhere that democracy dies in darkness. It ought to be public. Both sides ought to be able to call their witnesses in front of God and country and the American people. And then let the American people decide. And the president and his counsel should be allowed to participate. Now, I think that would be fair, and then I will happily judge the evidence. But you can't limit the witnesses, as Chairman Schiff and Speaker Pelosi are doing, selectively leak portions of the transcript that favor your opinion to friendly members of the press who lap it up like a puppy. I don't think any fair-minded person in the Milky Way believes that Speaker Pelosi or Chairman Schiff are impartial here.
Well, we look forward to the trial.
We
look forward to the trial in the Senate and then seeing what you decide to do. Senator, thank you for joining us.